We played the first real hand of the night. I'm dealt pocket sixes under the gun +1. There's a straddle on, so it's 5, 10, 20, 40. Since it's 10-handed, and I imagine there will be plenty of 3-betting going on, I could reasonably fold this hand from this position. Instead, I raised to 150. Skydiver Scott calls with pocket 5s in the cutoff. The button calls with ace-9 suited. The under the gun straddler calls for 110 more with 7 deuce suited. Note that we're not playing the 7 deuce game. The opponent just hates folding. There's over 600 in the middle. We're going 4 ways to the flop. We get a good one.
Oh my God!
How about top set
for Brad Owen? Oh my gosh! And on such a innocuous board for the most part, especially from an under the gun opening range, this is a dream scenario.
We've got a set on a board that isn't typically going to connect well with my early position opening range at all. Under the gun checks. Since I have a lot of opponents and most of the time I'll be weak on this board, it's a great situation for me to bet to hopefully induce a raise rather than slow play it. I make it 275. Cutoff has a pair and a gutter. He knows that this is normally going to be a better flop for him than for me. He falls for my trap and he raises to 1125. I expected people to try and bully me. It's amazing to make a strong hand right away that I can stick around with, which may cause people to be deterred from trying to put me in tough spots down the line. The button and under the gun players fold. I have a decision to make. I don't want to re-raise and have my opponent fold a hand like the one that he has. I flat to keep his bluffs in. We're heads up. The turn is a 10. I check to the cutoff, hoping that he'll barrel as a bluff or for value with a hand like pocket deuces or 3s. He's contemplating what he wants to do. I'm hoping for a large bet or a shove. He checks back. This rules out pretty much all the stronger hands that I thought he could have. It seems like he's given up. The river is another 3. We have a full house. I can't check because my opponent will check back anything worse than trip 3s, which I don't think that I'll have very frequently since it looks like I have at least an overpair to the board. I'm excited because I've got a boat in the very first hand of a huge game for me. I have barely more than a pot-sized bet left in my stack. I'm ripping it.
And Brad is already all in, very first hand.
Again, this is a board that's not going to be good for me most of the time. I'm hoping that my shove will look extremely strange. I can get looked up light. The cutoff thinks this is fishy. Maybe he imagines that my plan could be to come out strong by making some big plays. I like the idea of turning lots of hands with no value into bluffs once the opponent checks back turn, but I'm not sure how many of those that I'll have after calling the raise for 850 more on the flop. In my head, I'm thinking I probably should have bet small like 700 or 800 to either make it look like a blocker bet and possibly induce a shove from a hand like ace-5 of spades or get calls at hands like 7s, 8s, or 9s. There's still some slight chance that I can get called for a lot more. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. The cutoff finally folds. We win a large pot from my normal life, just kind of a medium one out here. It does a lot to settle my nerves and build some confidence since I'm now playing with a little bit of profit. The only way my night could get any better is if I'm dealt pocket aces in middle position. Is this real life or is this a dream? I'm pretty sure it's a dream. We're playing on a dream stream. I raise to 60. The player on my left calls in the hijack with king deuce of clubs. That's a bit speculative. People are certainly trying to get in the mix with me. The cutoff wakes up with ace king offsuit. He's not going anywhere. He 3-bets to 225. We're about 20 minutes into the session and I keep getting raised in 3-bet. Luckily, I'm getting dealt strong hands. Otherwise, I'd have a lot of difficult decisions. Something strange happens here with Nate in the big blind. He cold calls the 3-bet with king-queen suited. When he sees cards he likes, he doesn't enjoy letting them go for any price. I like his style, but he's got to be punished. I 4-bet to 1,000. The hijack folds quickly. I'd expect to take this down pre-flop a decent percentage of the time. Half the aces are accounted for. The situation was set up well for the cutoff to potentially put a light 3-bet squeeze on. The cutoff isn't folding though. Maybe he'll 5-bet. He reaches for chips and just calls. We're certainly going to be playing a large pot out of position. I'd imagine king-queen suited wouldn't be cold calling a 3-bet and definitely wouldn't call a 4-bet out of position, but my man Nate has a soft spot in his heart for lanky white guys and doesn't mind donating to my charity. He calls for 775 more. We're playing a 3-way 4-bet pot. It's already over 3,000 in the middle, and I've got everyone dominated. No need for you guys to smash the like button for extra run good today. The flop comes jack 3 deuce rainbow. Neither opponent really connects all that well. The big blind checks. The only hand that I'm worried about being up against is pocket jiggities, which either opponent could reasonably have, given how this has been played so far. I bet 1,200, a little over a third of the pot. Maybe someone will call with queens or 10s. The cutoff folds. The big blind lets his cards go as well. I'm okay with that result. Less than a half hour in, I'm up 3,800. I had a lot of anxiety about this session leading up to it, but winning right away has helped ease that. Next we've got ace queen offsuit under the gun +1. There's a $40 straddle on. I raised to 150. Skydiver Scott has king 8 offsuit in the cutoff. He calls. It's the perfect hand for him to get in the mix with because it can make 2 separate flushes and it'll have both the top and the bottom end of a 6-card straight if 9-10 Jack Queen comes out on the board. 6-card straights are a lot of fun. This is the kind of cutting edge pre-flop strategy the players are utilizing in Texas. Nate's on the button with 10-9 suited. He calls. Umid is the under the gun straddler. He has 10-7 offsuit. He's never seen 2 cards that he didn't like. Legend has it that he once got to showdown with a Charizard and proof of insurance. He calls. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It's Queen 10-4 with 2 spades. Everyone's got a piece. Umid has middle pair. I've got top. Scott has 2/3 of a 6-card straight. Nate has middle pair with a flush draw. It's a wild one. Under the gun checks. I don't want to allow people to see a free card, but I don't really love having 3 opponents with 2 of them having position on me. I bet 225 to hopefully narrow this down to 1 other player. Scott folds. Nate actually has the most equity. He calls with his combo draw. Umid is close to the top of his range given the fact that he has 2 actual cards that can be used in the standard poker game. He calls. I figure 1 or both could be on a draw of some sort. The turn is the 7 of spades, which smashes both opponents' holdings. Umid has 2 pair, and Nate has made a flush. Under the gun checks. I check immediately, knowing that I could potentially be drawing dead. Nate has a hand that he wants to take people to Value Town with. He bets 1,000. I could see him turning a hand like Ace-Jack offsuit with the Ace of Spades into a bluff here, but most of the time, I'd expect him to be betting for value in this particular spot. Umid doesn't take too long before he calls. As much as I hate folding top pair, top kicker, I don't get the sense I'm good on this board when 2 players are willing to put 1,000 more in on the turn, plus I'm not certain that I have any outs. I make the tough decision to lay it down. I'm glad it's the correct choice because when you're playing on stream and you're wrong in these types of situations, you tend to look a lot like an idiot. The river is a 6, it surprisingly goes check, and Nate wins it with his flush. Here we play one with some fun dynamics. It folds a Umid, who you can see is away from the table. He's in the big blind, and without looking at his cards, he puts in a raise to 60. You can see me double check that he hasn't looked. I get the answer that I like. I'm in the 3rd blind, and I call. We're heads up in position. I believe this is the first time that I've seen a flop in position the entire night. It comes Jack 10-5 with 2 hearts. We've got a gutter and a backdoor flush draw. Umid bets 200. It's more than the pot, and he still hasn't looked at his cards. We're playing really deep. I can possibly drill a straight, and if I don't hit it, I plan on turning my hand into a bluff. I call. This is when Umid looks at his cards for the first time. He sees that he has middle pair. That's decent for playing blind. You know what it's not better than though? A straight. We smash the turn in a weird situation. Umid's hand might be too good because he checks. If he had nothing, he might have continued firing as a bluff. I make nearly a pot-sized bet of 500. There's so many cards that I won't want to see, and I can maybe get called a lot lighter right now because of the odd dynamics. I've already got the check mark next to my name, which is a nice thing to have, and despite me calling more than a pot-sized bet on the flop, and me betting about the pot on the turn, Umid thinks he could still be good with 2nd pair. He calls. The river is the 3 of hearts. The flush draw gets there. I don't get the sense that that's what my opponent had since he probably would have fired again on the turn with 2 hearts. Umid checks. In my mind, he probably has 1 pair, maybe a jack. He doesn't like the fold. He called a pot-sized bet on the previous street. Maybe he'll do it again here. I bet 1,500. I'm hoping it'll look like I want to fold. Umid is tanking. He really doesn't want to give up his pair. He's thinking about all the Calvin Klein gear that he could buy if he calls and wins. Eventually, he exposes his 4. He genuinely looks like he's about to fold. I don't want him to do that, so I quickly try to do something that will ideally make him curious or skeptical enough to call. I show him a card without seeing which one it is. I wanted to pick the 8 of spades because I figure he won't believe that I'd be betting this large without a flush. Sadly, I expose the 7 of hearts. It gets him to pause for a second and keep his cards for a short amount of time longer. Then he still folds. I let him know that I accidentally showed him the wrong one. The pot is pushed towards us. That's not the last time that I tangle with Umid though. Towards the end of the night for me, I pick up Ace-King suited under the gun. I raise to 60. Zach is on my immediate left with 10-9 offsuit. He isn't interested in letting it go. He calls. The action gets to Nate in the cutoff. He has Queen-Jack of diamonds and he 3-bets at 325. This is an interesting decision from him. Earlier on in the video, you saw me flat a 3-bet with Ace-King after I opened from under the gun. That was slightly different because the opponent that 3-bet me was also in early position and had a few more players left to act behind him than Nate does here. I'm not flatting this time, especially because I don't want Zach to get a good price for flatting behind me. I announced a 4-bet to 1200. You can see Zach folding right away before my money's even out there. Nate has a lot of big pot energy. He's not going anywhere. He makes the call for 875 more because he wants to crush my soul and stack me. We're heads up, out of position. The flop comes ace queen 10 with 2 spades. We flop top pair with a gutter. It's great when you compare my equity to Nate's in this exact scenario, but when you don't know what your opponent is holding, poker is surprisingly a lot harder. I could be up against king jack, pocket queens, pocket tens, ace queen, ace 10, maybe queen 10 suited, ace king of spades, or ace jack of spades. None of those hands, aside from possibly queens and ace king of spades, are going to be in my range. I'll have aces, sometimes queens, ace king, and kings almost 100% of the time when I 4-bet from under the gun. So ace king is actually the second worst hand that I'll have out of that group. My opponent will have a lot more combinations to have me crushed. Checking puts me in a very awkward spot. I don't necessarily want to do that. I down bet to 900. I have 3,200 behind. I don't want to get jammed on because that'll put me to a tough decision. Nate has a lot of things to consider, including stack depth, the fact that everything I'm 4-betting with is going to have him beat, how much equity he might have, and how often he thinks that I'd be folding to a jam. Nate eventually lets his cards go, which I'm okay with. I win this one to be up around 1,500 on the night. I lose a few more small pots for this game before it gets even wilder as stack depths increase and people add on. I felt like I've been holding my breath the entire time and it's been stressful, so I book a win, rack up, and save some energy for the meetup game that's the next day.